Hello, I'm Ben. Welcome to the channel. So today we're going to talk briefly about the noise that's been going on around Tim Kennedy and his book, Scars and Stripes, which is not an original title. There's actually been a book written in this title before about a sniper in Vietnam. However, there's a lot of going back and forth and a lot of people piling on. And what I think is interesting these days is the SOF teams, they're supposed to be a family. And it just seems that they're the ones that stomp the mess out of each other as much as they can on the internet. And that's not anything new. If you've watched Mr. Ballin and his videos, this guy's never claimed to be anything impressive. He was a SEAL and served, one tour in the Middle East and was blown up. And after that, got out of the SEALs and created his channel and came in with scary stories and now is doing very well. But what seems to be the constant subject matter is the fact that the stories that come back are being expanded upon with some creativity. And I think it's interesting that you have a bunch of non-readers participating in these conversations. It's very simple. Every story you've ever heard has been embellished. Okay, if you think about the war back in Thermopylae, if you go all the way back to that war, if you go back to, in Troy and in the Spartans and every other story we've told that's been passed down through time, there's been embellishments. Now, was Kennedy's embellishments a bit much? Yeah, it does read like a comic book. Okay, this does not read like a true story. It reads like a comic book. There was one quote in here where he said he and one other guy were facing off against 400 people. That is, something that Superman or the Hulk might do, but that's not something a human being can do. Now, there has been people in the past that gave their lives in battle because they stood between theirs and a large number, and it was, it's typically in that situation fatal. The issue with the modern world and the modern war is everything is videotaped, everything is recorded, everything is on record. And so if you look at any of these stories, any of these stories that came back from recent wars, all of which are good and somewhat entertaining to read, but not everything is said inside these stories that is true. So you have to take some understanding of literary freedom when people are writing their own story, the embellishments in our memory. So let's say that they're free of any wrongful discord. Our memory doesn't serve us very well anyway. And this is what I mean by that. If you think back at any relationship you've ever been in, especially if you're thinking about missing that person, etc., what do you think about? You just think about the positive things. You don't think about the negative things. So when you're living off of your reputation, and that is what people are paying you to discuss and talk about, then obviously those people are going to expand on that. What I find interesting is that people that are supposed to be in their same group are the ones that are attacking them the most. And what I find interesting, and this is not just Tim Kennedy, this is anybody that's in that limelight. I think it's interesting that people who did not live in that world have opinions around it, including myself. I just don't like to see people stack up and act like what's been done in his book is not something that's done often. And obviously I don't defend the guy with the comments around, negatively towards gun control, etc., because I don't believe in that. I think you guys know, if you're fans of the channel, that I'm pro-Constitution, and I don't think anybody should mess with the Constitution at all, no matter what they did for a living. But I don't think Tim Kennedy is the worst one out there. There's been far worse before him that made comments that are absolutely ludicrous as well. So yeah, just wanted to put the 2 cents out there into the ether. I just came across this. Apparently this has been going on for a month. And people are stacking up, and now he's losing sponsors. I think recently the Concealed Carry Group, the USCCA or whatever they're called, which I don't join groups. I don't want to be in a collective like that. But they apparently fired him. Apparently a pistol company that's well known just basically cut an ad inside of an hour that they posted with him because of all the backlash from the book and what people are saying about the book, etc. So let me say this, and then I'll call it a video. In America, the story that we get is never news. Okay, it's the story that we're told. All right. Look at any presidential election. Look at any war we go into. If you go back as far as this country exists, we were led into something by lies. Okay, so you just have to understand the majority of what is out there is going to be somewhat fiction. You have to yourself disassociate with the emotion around the subject matter and get down to the brass tacks. And once you learn those facts, make decisions based on that. That's why the last 4 or 5 years have been so ridiculous with all the emotion and triggered people and all that jazz. When you're doing all that, you cannot think cognitively. So if you can't think cognitively, you're not able to do critical thinking. You're not able to look into things to see what they are and what they are not. And reading these books, you're not there. Reading these books and these stories of people in extreme events and not understanding when people in extreme events, the adrenaline is pumping, they remember things in far greater aptitude, inner light that might be beyond what it actually was. So not taking up for this cat, but I just think it's interesting that it's the group that he served with that's kind of pounding on him. And at the end of the day, guys, he did it to sell books to pay for, a way for his family to make a living. And I don't see that any differently than, say, pro wrestling, for example. I saw an interview one time, and I'm not a fan of pro wrestling. I was a wrestler in U.S. teams and USA wrestling and collegiate wrestling. That's what I did. But I heard a pro wrestler say it very well one time. It was Stone Cold Steve Austin, who I remember as Stunning Steve in the early days, but if you tell people that when they were crazy about him, they don't remember the long hair and the tight pink pants. However, somebody came to him at a conference, and I saw just this little clip. He said, "What do you think about Bill Goldberg copying your style and doing what you're doing to make it big?" And his quote back to the gentleman was, "Hey man, everybody's got a family. Everybody's got bills to pay." And I think that is the greatest way to explain this situation. If you're going to hold people to absolute truth on the books that they write and on the things that they say, and they're doing it for entertainment purposes to pad their pockets, then you need to make sure that there's an entertainment value that's added to that. So there's my 2 cents on that Reach It controversy. I don't understand why people are shocked that folks exaggerate in war stories. That is how you pass it down. That is how you build up morale, so you increase the number of recruits that come in. That's the purpose of it. And if you don't believe that, think about the Marine Corps ads back in the 80s and 90s. That's all it did. And think about the ads for the Navies back in that time too. They said they were a global force for good, if you remember that. So exaggeration is useful in these type of extreme things. And it's also meant to keep you engaged so you get through the whole book and you enjoy the whole thing as a piece of entertainment that's loosely based on historical fact in recent history with recent events. So that's the way I see it. On here it says it's an unapologetically American story of the fighting Taliban, UFC warriors, and myself. That's what it says on the front cover, but it doesn't say anywhere this is completely 100% based on a true story. So there you go. I'm Ben. If you like subject matter such as this and subjects such as these, please like, please subscribe. Be good.